Victorian love stories, Emma Watson in the 30s, and the coziest mysteries you've never heard of. BritBox is hiding 10 period dramas, and they're actually incredible. The Hardacres are a family working the docks in 1890s Yorkshire. Sam Hardacre gets injured, they're about to lose everything, and his wife Mary figures out how to rebuild their fortune from basically nothing. She gets so successful that she ends up buying the fish processing business where Sam used to work. Which is satisfying, right? Except here's what happens when you're new money in Victorian England. Nobody cares how much you have. The Hardacres bought a massive country estate. They're walking around in literal gilded halls, and the neighboring gentry still won't talk to them. This series has writers from Call the Midwife, produced by the All Creatures Great and Small team. They wanted to tell a working-class family story in period drama, which isn't done that often. It's the kind of show you watch when you want something easy and comforting. After World War II ended, Britain was gray and rationed and kind of miserable. Australia had an immigration scheme, come start a new life in the sun for £10. Just £10 and you could leave all of it behind. In 1956, a bunch of people took that deal. They all got on boats expecting paradise, but then they arrived and got put in a shabby migrant hostel that looked like a prisoner of war camp. The locals were hostile, the jobs were bad, and Australia had a White Australia policy, so the racism was pretty much government sanctioned. The show mixes the historical reality with personal drama, and it can get a bit soapy in how it delivers its message. But the core story is genuinely interesting. People escaping one nightmare and finding a different one. They even filmed it on location in Australia to make the 1950s look right. The Mitford sisters were 6 aristocratic siblings in 1930s Britain, and their lives went in the most insane directions possible. Diana Mitford left her wealthy husband for Oswald Mosley, who was Britain's most notorious fascist leader. She didn't just marry the guy, she went all in on his politics. Her sister Unity was so into fascism that she moved to Nazi Germany because she idolized Hitler, just genuinely believed he was right about everything and wanted to be near him. Meanwhile, another sister, Jessica, went the complete opposite way, rejected the whole aristocratic thing, became a communist, and eventually ran off to fight the fascists her sisters were worshiping. And the oldest sister, Nancy, watched all of it happen and turned it into satirical novels. She'd write thinly veiled versions of her family's drama and publish them. The show follows all of it through the late 30s with balls and country estates mixed in with the political chaos. The creator, Sarah Williams, adapted it from a biography and real letters the sisters wrote. Sometimes it leans too hard into a modern, campy style, but the basic story is so wild it kind of carries itself. The show opens on the morning Ruth Ellis is about to be executed. It's 1955, she's the last woman who'll be hanged in Britain, and they offer her a sedative before they do it. She says no. Then it goes back to show you how she got there. Ruth was 28, managing a nightclub in London, raising a kid on her own. She got involved with David Bletchley, a racing driver from a higher class. He was handsome and exciting, but he also was an alcoholic who cheated on her and beat her. After he humiliated her one time too many, she shot him outside a pub. At trial, Ruth had to convince 12 men that she had good reason to do what she did. But abuse wasn't a legal defense back then. The system had no room for what she'd been through, so her lawyer had to work with basically nothing. Lucy Boynton plays Ruth, and apparently the role took a real toll. She researched everything about Ruth's life, listened to recordings of her voice to get the accent right. You know how it ends from the first scene, but it keeps you watching anyway. Boynton and Toby Jones, who plays her lawyer, both gave performances that made a tough story worth sitting through. During the war, 4 women worked at Bletchley Park breaking codes, doing genuinely important intelligence work, helping win the war. By 1952, they were back to regular lives in London, housewives, normal jobs, keeping quiet about what they'd done. Then women started getting murdered around the city and the police couldn't figure out who was doing it. One of them, Susan, noticed patterns in the murders that the police completely missed. When she tried to tell them, they dismissed her. So she got the old team back together. Millie, who was a linguist, Lucy, who had photographic memory, Jean, who used to supervise them and still had connections. They used the same skills they'd use to break Nazi codes to track down a serial killer. The show requires you to accept some convenient coincidences. Each woman happens to have exactly the skill set needed for detective work, and it's basically cozy mystery stuff dressed up in 1950s noir. One reviewer called it Rosemary and Thyme meets Bletchley Park, which is pretty accurate, but it commits to the premise hard enough that you go with it. Stephen Fry wrote and directed his first movie back in 2003. It's about rich socialites in 1930s England throwing parties and causing scandals while the country's heading toward war. He managed to get James McAvoy, Michael Sheen, Emily Mortimer, basically every great British actor working at the time. It's based on Evelyn Waugh's Vile Bodies, and the setup is perfect. These are people with fancy titles but no actual money, and they're dancing on the edge of disaster without realizing it. For most of the movie, Fry nails the satire. It's sharp and funny and has something to say about a society that's lost its mind with frivolity. Then he gets to the ending and completely fumbles it. Fry abandons Waugh's original ending and rewrites it into something contrived that doesn't work at all. The theory is Waugh's ending was too dark and whoever funded the film made him change it. So after 2 acts of building this satirical edge, you get a finale that critics called a monumental piece of misjudgment. Still worth watching for what Fry almost pulled off though, and the cast is fantastic. Emma Watson's first role after Harry Potter wrapped. She plays one of 3 orphan girls who get raised as sisters in 1930s London. The 3 of them make a pact to get their names in the history books. Pauline wants to be an actress, Petrova's obsessed with aviation and wants to fly planes, and Posey's a gifted ballerina. It's gentle and family-friendly, everyone gets their happy ending. Some people find it too sweet, but that's kind of the whole point. It's based on a 1936 children's novel and stays true to that uplifting spirit. Nothing groundbreaking here, just a sincere period piece about 3 girls pursuing different dreams. If you want to see Emma Watson doing something completely different from Hermione, there you go. This one's based on a true story about how Chester Zoo got started. George Mottershead comes back from World War I, can't settle into normal life, rescues an injured monkey, and decides he's going to build a zoo without bars. Novel concept for the 1930s. He buys a crumbling estate, gets his wife and daughters on board, and starts collecting animals. The neighbors immediately hate the idea. They don't want wild animals and crowds destroying their quiet village. Money's always running out. Getting a zoo license turns into an endless bureaucratic nightmare. Every episode has some small disaster. Peacocks escape, they have to transport an elephant, something always goes wrong. But the show was really popular. The real Chester Zoo's managing director said it gave them the equivalent of £30 million in free publicity. People loved it. It's a real shame the BBC canceled it after 1 season. 6 episodes, that's all they made. Said they needed to create room for new shows. A Catholic nun in 1960s England solves murders using forensic science. Sister Boniface has a PhD in chemistry and an IQ of 156, which the show reminds you of constantly. She rides around on a motorized scooter in full habit and keeps outsmarting the local police with her microscope and scientific knowledge. Each episode is self-contained. Someone gets murdered at a vineyard or a rock concert or whatever, Sister Boniface shows up and solves it by the end. Very Agatha Christie-style cozy mysteries, but with comedy and 1960s retro flair. The mysteries aren't particularly complex and the stakes are never that dark. There's a formula to every episode, but that's what people watch it for. Escapist, wholesome murder mysteries where a nun on a scooter is smarter than everyone else. Julian Fellowes made this right after Downton Abbey. It's about 1840s London high society and 2 families hiding a secret that goes back to the Battle of Waterloo. If you like Downton, you already know what you're getting. Elaborate costumes, ballroom scenes, everything that made Downton so great. The difference is Belgravia wraps everything up in 6 episodes. No dragging it out for 7 seasons. Every scandal and secret gets resolved by the finale. Fellows uses it to explore old money versus new money in Victorian England, the snobbish aristocrats looking down on the rising middle class. It's warm, it's comforting, there's themes about forgiveness and late life second chances. One critic called it very bingeable high-class cheese, which honestly sums it up perfectly.